Hey guys, it's me, Lorty. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, I thought I would finally put together a Rhino Ratsnake care guide for you guys. This is one of my absolute favorite snakes that I have ever kept, both species-wise and the two individuals that I currently have in my reptile family. Right back here you can see Needle. But in today's video, I thought I would kind of take you through and give you some care advice for these animals. I have only been keeping these for a couple years. I am not an expert on this species. There are a lot of breeders and keepers that have been working with these animals for 10, 15, 20 years plus. They are an awesome resource, and there's also a lot of information available online on these guys that's very accurate as well. So if you are interested in acquiring one of these snakes, I'm going to give you what's been working for me in this video, but definitely do your research and acquire as much information as you possibly can before setting up your own habitats and getting your own snakes. For those of you who follow me over here at Pale Scales on Instagram, you will already recognize these incredible girls that I'm about to show you. Needle and Katana are definitely a highlight of my page. I'm absolutely obsessed with rhinoceros rat snakes. They are without a doubt my favorite snake species that I keep, and I'm really excited to introduce them to you in this video. Hi, Worm. Can I get you out? Got her. All right, so here is my adult female Needle. I have had this girl for going on 2 years. I got her as a yearling and she came from a show out in California. Unfortunately, I don't know the breeder that produced her or who she came from at that show, but she ended up here with a local reptile keeper who ended up getting tired of her and wanting to rehome her, and I snatched her up. I paid $400 for her as a sub-adult female, which is a pretty average cost. You can sometimes find them a little bit cheaper, and you can oftentimes find them more expensive than that, but typically you're going to be spending anywhere between $300 to $800 on one of these snakes. She had already gone through her color change to the beautiful green that you see here, and she was very blue as a baby. She still does have a lot of turquoise undertones, but she is getting more and more green as she gets older. Hi, Needle. I didn't get to see her in the silver phase, but I do have a baby that I'm going to be showing you that is still undergoing its color change, and it's still in the silver phase. There are currently no morphs associated with rhino rat snakes. They typically all have a variety of this kind of shade of green. However, there is a blue line, which I believe originated out of Europe, that is currently being experimented with to see how genetic it can possibly be, but those animals are a striking bright blue. I've heard all kinds of mixed things about it pertaining to the diet that they're getting and the UVB, things like that, kind of helping advance that blue coloration. But for the most part, it is sort of a genetic detail that we're currently exploring if it can be passed on to other individuals. Other than the blue line, which hasn't quite been identified as a morph of rhino rat snakes, there are actually two different localities. This one, which is the most common rhino rat snake that you'll see that displays that striking green color and the beautiful black eyeliner. And then there's also the Hainan locality, which is much more rare in the pet trade. I've rarely ever come across photos of them, but they are a larger snake. They get quite a bit larger than these regular rhinoceros rat snakes, and they actually lack that black line of pigmentation on their face and have more yellow blushing across the face. This species reaches an adult length between 4 and 5 feet. On average though, you're gonna see adults that are about 4.5 feet long, so they are a really manageable size, and they don't weigh too much. They're not a very heavy-bodied colubrid. Needle is basically full grown. She probably has a little bit more growth to do. Rhinoceros rat snakes are considered adult or breeding age at 4 years of age. All rhinoceros rat snakes are going to be very well dispositioned from the time that they are young. These animals are almost always captive bred and born, and very rarely wild caught. As far as the temperament of rhinoceros rat snakes is concerned, this is a really docile, easy to handle species. They're not gonna bluff strike at you or bite and latch onto you. Typically, they don't really tend to bite at all. Very, very rarely will you encounter an individual that is the exception to that. Out of all of the individuals that I have been around, which is going on like a dozen now, I have never encountered one that was inclined to bite or was defensive or aggressive in any way. And I really do feel that if you encounter one that's nippy or bitey or striky, that is going to be an intense exception to this species, because so far I have yet to ever find a rhinoceros rat snake that wasn't just completely mild-mannered, gentle, and super friendly. They don't really stress that much. I think for sure they make awesome display animals just because you can usually find them out in plain sight. But as far as wanting to take them out and handle them frequently, I don't think that it's a problem for these guys. They're really social animals, super friendly, and they don't seem to be bothered by frequent, responsible handling. I really do feel that the awesome temperament of these snakes, partnered with how hardy and easy they are to care for, and just their general beauty, makes them an awesome species for both advanced keepers and novices. The main characteristic that you're going to notice about rhinoceros rat snakes is this absolutely adorable little horn that they have on the tip of their nose. And researchers believe several reasons for the horn. There's actually really no definitive evidence of what it's for. A lot of people speculate that the horn on the face is meant to imitate a grub, which would then attract small birds and other little small prey items that they could get in the canopies of trees. I also think that it could be used to imitate vines or sticks so that predators cannot easily identify them as they are camouflaged. Some researchers believe that it actually acts as a beacon to kind of collect drops of rain that would then fall into the snake's mouth and be able to get hydrated more easily. There's so many different theories about that, but nobody really knows what the horn is used for. A lot of people ask me what the horn feels like, and without being too invasive to her, it is, if you can see that, kind of flexible. It's actually quite fragile, so I do refrain from ever touching her horn, and I would recommend that if you have one of these, you do the same. But yeah, it's just made of soft tissue scales that are very fragile and very flexible. It is important husbandry-wise to give your snake a lot of space, to give it a suitable environment where it's not stressing out, so that it's not inclined to ever rub its face and disturb its horn. As far as availability goes for these guys, they're really kind of an obscure species that you're not going to find at most pet stores or reptile shops. So if you're interested in acquiring a rhinoceros rat snake of your own, I highly recommend doing your research on reputable breeders. Good places to start with that are both on Instagram and also on Facebook. My favorite resource for these guys, and the place where I actually found my other Rhino Ratsnake that I acquired recently, was through the Rhino Ratsnake room on Facebook. I simply put out a feeler that I wanted to buy one, asking people if they could recommend me some breeders, and a bunch of people got back to me, and I found the perfect breeder and got my baby from them. But that is a great resource to use. So 100% if you are looking to acquire one of these snakes, get serious about it. Join the Rhino Ratsnake group on Facebook and start researching your breeders and looking around for people that are gonna have some upcoming clutches, that might already have some available, or that can put you on a wait list to get one. Unlike a snake that would be adapted to hide from predators, rhinoceros rat snakes are actually adapted to evade predators using camouflage techniques. So they actually mimic the environment around them, and they stay nice and still up in the canopies of trees, imitating the vines, leaves, and sticks and branches of the tree itself. The really cool detail of that characteristic is that your snake will probably be displaying itself up in the canopy of whatever branches you give it, and you won't really see them hiding very often, which is really nice to be able to display the snake. So it probably doesn't really feel that way based on just how striking and cool this animal looks, but the care on these snakes is surprisingly easy. The rhinoceros rat snake is a semi-arboreal, semi-aquatic, tropical species of snake that lives in the northern Vietnam region to the southern region of China. They are a montane species, so they do kind of tolerate a temperature range anywhere between the 60s up into the mid 80s, but they do really, really well on ambient temperatures in your house. I personally do not have any heat on mine right now. I do occasionally offer her a basking light, which gets the temp up to about 80 degrees. But for the most part, she thrives really well in ambient temps between 73 and 78 degrees Fahrenheit. As far as feeding these guys goes, they are really healthy, food-motivated individuals. Not to the point where they're gonna latch onto your hand while you're holding them and try to eat you like a king snake would, but they do have a really healthy feeding response, which is gonna make them really easy to take care of and to feed. They feed on rodents, specifically mice, super food motivated, and most individuals are gonna eat like clockwork for you. Needle is a bit of an exception to that. She can be a little bit more picky, especially in times where she's about to go into a shed, or if her day and night cycle is changing with the different seasons, or if my house temperatures are fluctuating a lot. But I trust her process, whatever that may be. If she decides for a month that she doesn't want to eat, I don't worry about it. When reading most basic information that's available online, it's going to tell you that rhino rat snakes are nocturnal, which is in fact not true. They are a diurnal species. They possess a round pupil for daylight sight, and they can be somewhat crepuscular. They are active in the morning and in the evenings quite a bit, but this is a diurnal species. Unfortunately, a lot of articles portray them as being nocturnal because that's when they're most frequently sighted. Since during the day they are such masters of camouflage, it's really impossible to see one, but it's much easier to see one at night when they're trying to cross the road to get to a different spot. However, that does not make them nocturnal. The information that you're reading online that they are nocturnal is actually false. This is a diurnal species. As far as enclosure size for these guys, a single adult will do quite well in a setup like this, which is an 18 by 18 by 36. However, you can offer them more space. A lot of people keep pairs in something like this, which is the 18 by 24 by 36, or you could go even larger than that. There's really no limit to how large you can make the cage as long as there's an appropriate humidity level and temperature gradient, and you're offering lots of hiding and climbing spaces for these guys like they would have in nature. You will encounter rhino rat snakes that can either be super active and always exploring their cage, or you can find individuals that are quite complacent being sedentary, either just lazing around in their water dish or sitting perched up quietly on their branches. Needle tends to be on the lazy side. She really never does a lot in her enclosure, although she's always beautifully on display for me to interact with. She typically isn't out exploring her environment that often. She tends to either want to bask in her water dish or to just chill up on her perch. Katana, on the other hand, my baby rhino rat snake, is always out exploring her habitat, probably because she's a bit younger, but she just has a very active personality. In captivity, keepers and especially breeders will start cooling their snakes sometime around December and then wake them up again around March. This brumation period is essential for fertility rates if you are breeding these animals, and a lot of naturalist keepers, even if they're not breeding their animals, do like to give them that brumation period every year. Personally, I do not brumate any of my animals. I am just a keeper, I'm not breeding them. That is something that you could debate to do yourself if you ever wanted to keep this species. It's perfectly normal behavior for them to brumate every year for a few months, but if you chose not to brumate your snakes, again, this is a really tolerant, hardy species that's not going to require it in order to thrive. I have Needle's habitat positioned at the very top of my snake display rack here, and I do prefer to keep her in a glass enclosure. This would be something that I would call out for you if you are thinking about getting one of these in the future. A lot of keepers successfully keep these snakes in PVC, which is great for holding in humidity and temperatures. However, I personally do like using glass for these because they are such a visual species. I think they really benefit from all of the natural light that enters, and I think they also get a lot of enrichment from being able to look out of the enclosure and see what's going on around them. Although rhino rat snakes are considered a semi-arboreal species, it is imperative that you're giving them horizontal space to be able to stretch out like she's doing right now, and that you're also giving them a little bit of height so that they can actually perch off of the ground. The other big factor for these snakes, besides their horizontal and vertical climbing space, is going to be their water vessel. This is where they will also spend a great deal of their time, so the bowl should be large enough that the snake can completely curl up and submerge in there. Rhino rat snakes are prone to two different issues. One of them is overfeeding, in which they can develop fatty tumor deposits along their body. And the most common, is scale rot, and that happens from an environment that is either being kept way too wet with dense humidity and too frequent of misting, and also their nature of wanting to be semi-aquatic and soaking in their bowl. Bacteria can accumulate after a couple days of not thoroughly washing the water dish or emptying the water, and they also love to poop and pee inside of their water bowl, which they will remain in without caring. So it's really important to check this every single day to make sure if your snake is soaking that they're not soaking with any feces or urates in there with them. These snakes will always utilize any branches that you give them, and I personally love ghostwood for this species. It's really great for high humidity setups because it doesn't really decay or mold, and it has a nice soft finish to it, which is great for the Rhino Ratsnake scales. And it also has some really beautiful variegations in the wood that you can see there that just make it look really striking and aesthetic inside of the terrarium. But I give her a lot of options to be able to stretch out across this wood. It's also high up off the ground, so she can feel like she really has a lot of perching space. This in particular is one of her favorite spots that she is in right back there. And as long as you're providing them all of that climbing space and a little bit of foliage to nestle into and feel more secure, they're really gonna thrive inside of their habitat. For the substrate in this enclosure, I've literally just used a vivarium mix substrate, which could be the equivalent of like a jungle mix or a repti soil. This one I got from my local plant shop, and it's pesticide and fertilizer free, so it's great to use with your plants and your reptiles. And I have just covered it with a layer of oak leaf litter that was treated in the oven. And I think that looks really nice and naturalistic. As far as the heating element for these guys go, I actually do not have her heating bulb on right now, but I usually keep it right here so that she has the opportunity to bask in this area. But as my temps are warming up here, I actually remove it in the spring and summertime. These animals do thrive on ambient temperatures. There are a lot of people that still insist on putting that basking gradient in there, but for me personally, it has worked really well to just keep my snake at ambient room temps and allow the temperature to fluctuate in here, creating the gradient that she is using. My temperatures range anywhere from about 70 degrees in the evening at night up to 80 degrees during the day. Rhino rat snakes are a tropical species. They come from a humid, dense forest area, so it is important to provide them with a decent amount of humidity. However, I wouldn't go too crazy or overboard with that. It's actually very easy to achieve with these snakes, unlike species like a Brazilian rainbow boa, which has high humidity requirements but can be a little more complicated, or even something like dart frogs, which require a lot of humidity but are extremely fragile and complicated about it. The rhino rat snakes are much more forgiving with their humidity requirements. It doesn't mean that you can starve them of humidity. That's definitely not the way to go. But if your humidity is not perfect 24/7, they're gonna be very, very forgiving of that. For that reason, when people ask me what the humidity range they should keep for their animals is, I tell them, honestly, keep it the same way that you would keep something like a crested gecko. You really don't need a humidity gauge in here telling you the precise percentage that you have at all times. Typically, as long as you have a good humid substrate layer, a nice large water dish, and you're misting the enclosure once or twice a day, that is gonna be perfectly adequate to keep up the humidity level that these snakes would need at around 50 to 75%. If you're still confused about what I mean by maintaining the humidity with just daily misting, this is literally all that I do. And I like to mist her as well because they do tend to love drinking from that. You can see Needle's actually drinking from the mist right over there from her scales. And that's literally it. About 60 seconds worth of misting every day like that gives her an opportunity to drink from her scales, drink off of the glass, which they really prefer doing. And it also gets the plants nice and watered, the substrate nice and moist, and that humidity in there every day is gonna be perfect for your rhino rat. Rhino rat snakes like to drink naturally from rainfall, so this is really nice to imitate for them in their habitat. So every single day when I'm misting her enclosure and wetting the substrate in the wood, I do take caution to make sure that I'm misting her directly, and she'll use her body and the position of her head to be able to drink the rainfall that's coming from my mister. Very rarely have I ever witnessed her drink from a bowl of water. They're typically going to often be hydrated by how often you're misting them. Technically, rhino rat snakes do not need any UVB source in order to thrive, so it is not required. However, this species does extremely well when they have a good day and night cycle. So that is a really important part of deciding where to put your enclosure and whether or not you will be using a UVB light on the enclosure. For me in particular, I have her in this room just off of a window that has a ton of bright natural light pouring through. So I don't use any lighting elements on my enclosure for her at all. But if your snake was in a room where it was a little bit darker or it didn't have this much exposure to bright natural sunlight, then I would definitely consider putting a lighting fixture on the tank, either a UVB or an LED, or even if you have plants, some kind of grow light to help give your snake the benefit of that nice day and night cycle. This is the enclosure that I keep my baby rhino rat snake in, and I actually just pulled her out and arranged her on here for you guys to see her a little better. This is Katana. I don't know if you can tell, it's kind of hidden, but she has a really big mouse belly right now because I just fed her last night. So I won't be handling her too much at this moment, but I'll definitely put some clips of her in the video for you guys to see. Her enclosure is a 12 by 12 by 18. This is the perfect size for a hatchling or even a juvenile. You don't want to give them too much space as babies because it will really stress them out and can impede their ability to soak, to drink, and to feed. Breeders and even a lot of keepers will house babies inside of tubs, which is perfectly acceptable to do. However, it's my personal belief that it is very enriching to keep rhino rat snakes in open visual enclosures like glass. So I did go ahead and transition Katana as soon as I got her into a glass enclosure. And I can really tell that she loves the visual enrichment that comes along with being in a fully glass enclosure like this. I constantly catch both of these girls, her and Needle, spying on me throughout the day and the evening, and they're just so cute to look at. I will say that baby rhino rat snakes can be a little more challenging to keep than adults, so if you're looking at getting one, I do recommend trying to find a well-established baby or sub-adult that's been feeding consistently and is doing a good job eating, because they can be quite picky to get on food. Katana was actually with the breeder for about 3 months before I finally just cracked and was like, dude, just send her, like, I'll get her eating, because she was eating so inconsistently he didn't feel comfortable sending her to me yet. But since I do have experience with baby snakes, and especially with rhino rat snakes, I knew that I could get her eating well. As of right now, I don't have her eating perfectly. She actually only eats using the brown paper bag method, which I will show you later in this video or possibly in another video. But it's basically where I put her inside of a small brown paper bag with the mouse, and I leave her in there until she consumes it. It's a really good trick for picky eaters, especially babies, and that is actually how I have been feeding her consistently since I have gotten her. But I'm hoping that within the next 6 months I can transition her away from the brown paper bag method and just to taking prey regularly off of tongs for me. This is little baby Katana. Now that her meal has settled, I can actually hold her. But this is my baby rhinoceros rat snake. I got another female, honestly, because I just really wanted to experience what it was like to have one go through the ontogenetic color change. So I did want to touch on that before I cut this video off, but that is one really cool characteristic of rhino rat snakes. They're born into what I call the silver phase, where there's sort of this brownish gray color. And then gradually, over about 6 months to a year or more, they begin what's called a ontogenetic color change, where their scale pattern actually continuously sheds into that beautiful green color that you can see back there on Needle. If you haven't been around rhino rat snakes enough, it's kind of difficult to see the types of variety that there are in them, but they each, although they do turn green, kind of have their own color palette. Katana's probably going to end up being very vivid green with a yellow jawline since she has so much prominent yellow on her jaw already. And then Needle, as you can see, really doesn't have as much yellow. She has more of that whitish blue jawline. So it's just really neat to have two individuals that are so different. Here's a close-up of Needle to kind of show you guys what I'm talking about with the color differences. You can see she really doesn't have any yellow on her jawline. She was actually born silver, but with a white jawline. So she really doesn't have a lot of displays of yellow in her scales. She's definitely more of a turquoise blue color, which is so pretty. And you can see up close just this exquisite pattern that rhino rat snakes have with these almost diamond-shaped scales, contrasted by blues and whites and blacks atop that green. A few people have asked me if when Katana gets older and a more suitable size, if I will be cohabbing her with Needle. That is something that I could do, but personally I think Needle just prefers having her own space. So I'm going to probably not cohab them and just give Katana her own environment, either something this size or even possibly something this size, just depends on how active she'll be as an adult. But they can successfully be cohabbed either in pairs or females can be kept together. So that is it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed seeing Katana and my beautiful girl Needle and learning more about the care of this species. If you've ever been interested in keeping one, like I've said this whole video, highly recommend them. Can't recommend them enough. I think they are great for novice and advanced reptile keepers. That is it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching and subscribing, and as always, I will see you all in the next one.